Plot elements for fiction stories. On this slide, we are going to review the parts of a story using the story arc or the plot diagram. It is the same thing. So there are 5 elements of plot. The first is the exposition. This contains the characters and setting and how the story begins. Second is the rising action. These are the events leading up to the third part of the plot. The third part is the climax, the most exciting moment. This is also called a turning point in the story. The fourth part of the story arc is the falling action. These are the events that are going to lead you to the ending. The fifth and final part is called the resolution, and this is where the story ends and the problem is solved with the resolution. The first part of the story is called the exposition. It is found here on the plot diagram, the first straight line running along the bottom. It contains the characters and the setting. And this is when the reader is introduced to the story. Let's look at an example of what the exposition looks like. We're going to use the story Cinderella to examine all the parts of a plot. In this example, once upon a time, in a land far away, there lived a girl named Cinderella. She lived with her evil stepmother and her 2 evil stepsisters. In the first lines of the story of Cinderella, we are introduced to once upon a time in a land far away. And then we introduced to Cinderella, her evil stepmother, and stepsisters. Once upon a time in a land far away tells us the setting. Cinderella, her stepmother, and stepsisters are all characters. Again, the exposition will introduce the reader to the setting, where and when a story takes place, and the characters who are going to be in the story. Continuing on the plot diagram, we have a word that is not on the plot diagram, but is a very important part: the conflict. The conflict is where the exposition meets the rising action. It is also called sometimes an inciting event because it incites the conflict or begins the conflict. So this is the story's central problem. And every story has a problem. From the conflict, we then move up into the rising action. That is the part that goes from the exposition up to the climax. This is the main part of the story. It moves the plot along, and it tells where the complications arise. When you fill out a plot diagram, it will contain many events. Returning to our example of Cinderella, let's look at the conflict and rising action. It says, every day the evil stepmother made Cinderella work all day and into the night. One day an invitation was sent to all of the young maidens of the kingdom. The evil stepmother would not let Cinderella go. Cinderella's godmother appeared and dressed her in a gown and glass slippers and sent her off to the ball. As the clock struck 12, Cinderella ran to make it home and left her glass slipper behind. First, we see the major conflict. The stepmother made Cinderella work all day and into the night. Our first rising action event was when the invitation arrived, and the stepmother said Cinderella could not attend. The next event was that Cinderella's godmother appeared and gave her a gown and glass slippers to attend the ball. And the third and final rising action event is that the clock struck 12, Cinderella ran home and left the glass slipper behind. Again, we remember that plot is the sequence of events. And we see here the first rising action, second rising action, and third rising action events. After the rising action, we arrive at the climax, the most exciting part of the story, and when we learn the outcome. Again, this is going to be the most exciting or intense part of the story for the protagonist. And in our example, our protagonist is Cinderella. This can be also referred to as the OMG moment, right? The most exciting. And again, is that turning point where things change for the protagonist and move us toward the next part of the story. So let's look at the climactic moment for Cinderella. The clock begins to strike 12, and Cinderella is on a quest to make it home before midnight. This is where she realizes that it is midnight and she needs to leave the ball before she turns back in to the Cinderella that her family knows and recognizes. So she must leave the ball. And we wonder, will Cinderella make it home? This is again that very climactic moment, very exciting and very intense. After the climax, we go to the falling action. And this is where we are leading up to the end of the story. These are the events that follow the climax and lead to the resolution. And the conflict begins to move towards that resolution. We're starting to see solutions coming for the protagonist. And now looking at the falling action for Cinderella. Prince Charming came to Cinderella's house to try the slipper on her. The slipper fits, and Prince Charming takes Cinderella as his bride. Our first event is that Prince Charming goes to Cinderella's house so that she may try on the slipper. And the second falling action event is that the slipper fits and Prince Charming takes Cinderella away from her home and he is going to marry her. And now the resolution. Notice that in the word we see solution, right? We are solving the problem. And we know it comes at the end of the story. So it is going to be that last and final line in the plot diagram or story arc. So our story is coming to the end and all the loose ends of the plot are tied up. So there are no parts of the story left being unfinished, unanswered, or untold. And those remaining questions are answered. The conflict then is resolved, right? The problem is solved. Noticing that word again. And looking at this resolution in Cinderella and Prince Charming live happily ever after. And that is our resolution and how the story ends. Now I'd like you to take a minute and think to yourself, how did I do and how do I understand the plot diagram? Am I still in that I don't get it and I think I need some more help? Am I at a 2 where I kind of get it or sort of get it, but maybe I could use a little bit more practice? Or are we at 3? I get it and I can explain it. Or 4, I get it and I can teach my friends. Right? We're looking to shoot for that 2 to 3 range and hoping for 3. 4 is mastery. So it's okay if you're not feeling quite there yet. We will get there, boys and girls.